Attorney General William Barr today sharply criticized the management of the Manhattan Federal Jail, where wealthy financier Jeffrey Epstein was found dead in his cell this weekend. As John Yang reports, Epstein's death does not mean the end to the federal sex trafficking investigation that led to his indictment.
In his remarks today, the Attorney General also pledged that any co-conspirators should not rest easy. The victims, he said, deserve justice, and they will get it. So where does the case go now? Jessica Roth is a professor at Yeshiva University's Cardozo School of Law and joins us from New York. Jessica Roth, thanks. What do prosecutors in the case of the United States versus Jeffrey Epstein do now that Jeffrey Epstein is dead?
Well, the case against Jeffrey Epstein himself will be dismissed because he's now deceased, and you can't proceed with a criminal case against a person who's dead. But the overall criminal investigation will continue. Over the weekend, U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, Jeff Berman, issued a statement in which he made clear that the criminal investigation would continue, and he said that his office would continue to stand up for the victims. And in particular, he pointed to the fact that Jeffrey Epstein had been charged in one count of the indictment with conspiring with others to engage in sex trafficking. And that's significant because the law of conspiracy requires proof that two or more persons agreed to commit a crime. And what that means is that Mr. Berman was prepared to prove in court that at least one other person and possibly others were engaged in a criminal conspiracy with Jeffrey Epstein.
Well, we know that in that highly criticized Florida non-prosecution agreement, were named four potential co-conspirators who were not charged. And in this New York indictment, there were three people cited, though not named, who also participated in this. You think we're likely to see indictments against those folks coming up in the coming days?
I don't know about the timeline, but certainly from everything that's been indicated by the U.S. Attorney's Office and what's been publicly reported, it would seem that they have significant evidence against other people. As you mentioned in the indictment, there are people identified not by name, but in terms of the role that they played. So clearly the U.S. Attorney's Office has evidence against those other people, and they will be pursuing that investigation and looking at also the evidence that was collected during the search of Jeffrey Epstein's homes that was done on the day of his arrest to see what that yields about the involvement of co-conspirators and accomplices. It's been reported that his pilots have been subpoenaed for their testimony, and they would have significant information about who else may have been involved in arranging that travel to facilitate the sex trafficking. So I think we need to be patient as the investigators reorient to a case in which Jeffrey Epstein will not be sitting at the defense table. But Mr. Berman made clear that the investigation is ongoing.
And even without a conviction, can prosecutors go after his assets, or in this case, I guess, his estate?
Yes. So there is still a process in which the U.S. Attorney's Office, through which the U.S. Attorney's Office can go after assets that were used to facilitate the crimes that have been alleged here. So, for example, his Manhattan townhouse allegedly was used as a place where some of the unlawful activity occurred. If his properties in the Virgin Islands were involved, those also could be sought through what's called a civil asset forfeiture proceeding. The advantage of that, first, is that it can be handled by the U.S. Attorney's Office, and any assets that are recovered distributed to victims for restitution through the federal government. It also allows proof by a preponderance of the evidence standard, which is the civil standard of proof rather than the criminal proof beyond a reasonable doubt standard. It also offers an advantage, frankly, of allowing the narrative of what unfolded in his crimes to be told, because much of the same proof would be offered that would have been offered at a criminal trial against Jeffrey Epstein.
And of course, this doesn't do anything to the civil lawsuits that might be coming from accusers.
No, those can proceed as well. So the accusers have multiple avenues through which they can seek some measure of justice. None of them will be the same, of course, as actually confronting Jeffrey Epstein in a criminal case. But through the civil lawsuits, they can pursue his estate. As I mentioned, the civil asset forfeiture proceeding against specific assets that were used to facilitate his crimes is another avenue of potential relief. And then, of course, as we discussed a moment ago, there's the possibility of criminal proceedings against others who were his accomplices and co-conspirators.
Jessica Roth of the Cardozo School of Law, thank you very much.
Thank you.